Hashem, today's Dafyomi, broadcasting from the Ohel, Libby's Kever in Queens, New York. And Dafyomi, we're going to start on the bottom of the bottom of these two lines from the bottom. On 70, today's Dafyomi is I am Hey, 75. We're going to start on the bottom of 74b. The Gemara said that if the Kachim was Kachim Mimpamino, then what you could do is you could bring each carbon, just bring them all on the condition of whoever is the owner. So the Gemara says, how would that work? How could you say you bring them all in tonight? There's a concept of putting your hands on the animal before you bring the korban and saying a confessional prayer or saying a specific prayer. This is called smicha. And each owner needs to do that. The owner needs to do it. And since we don't know who the owner is, how can you bring all the sacrifices on a condition? How can you bring them all conditionally? So I'm Rav Yosef, the korban nashim. Yosef says these refers to the sacrifice of women. Women are not required to do smicha. And so since this refers to the sacrifice of women, and women are not required to do smicha, therefore it's okay. So it says about korban anashim, well, if it's a sacrifice of men, it wouldn't be required. So the Gemara says, Abai challenges this on top of Ayin Hayam and Aleph. Carbon Yachav, Genis Ariv, the carbon Yachav. Let's say you have two individual carbonos that get stuck with each other. The carbon Sibor, Genis Ariv, the carbon Sibor, and a communal carbon that got mixed up with a different communal carbon, or carbon Yachav, carbon Sibor, an individual with a carbon. Rashi says that the goat of the Nasi with the goat of the Antif, or an Oa with an Oa. Genis Ariv is that they got mixed up with each other. Noticing Dalam Matanos doing the das. Noticing Dalam Matanos Mikol Echad Echad. So then what you do is you take 4 matanos from each of them, 4 applications from each of them. And then for sure they're all going to be sufficient. And if you got one application from all of them, then it's going to be okay. Like we said earlier in Daf Hamid, that if anything that goes on the Mizbeach Chitzon, that you put 1 matana, it's sufficient. And if you do 4 from all of them together, yatsa, it's also okay. When do we say that we require 4 matanos from each one? Where they got mixed up while they're alive. But if they got mixed up after they're dead, meaning say that they got mixed up in one cup, then under those circumstances, you're going to put 4 matanos from all of them together because we assume that they're all mixed up and there's at least from all of them, from both of them. So that's where there's nisar v'shlutin. Avon nisar v'shlutin, those in arba matanos. They got mixed up in the cup, then we just put in 4 applications from all of them. And if we did 1 application from all of them, we fulfilled your obligation. Rabbi Omer, Rowan es hamatana mieshba kidei lozeh kshera. Rabbi says we see the application, and if there's sufficient, Rowan es hamatana mieshba kidei lozeh kshera. V'emlav psula. Rabbi says we look at the matana, and if there's enough for this and for this, if there's enough for both of them, it's kshera, v'imlav psula. And so Rebbe says you look at the application, if there's enough blood for both of them, it's kosher, otherwise disqualified. But anyway, we see from here, what's the question? Katana yachad dum yud tzibor. It says an individual carbon got mixed up with the communal carbon. Isn't it the case that they're both similar to each other? Not tzibor gabri, just like tzibor, we assume it's man. Why is that the case? That the assumption is that it's for men. So that the tzibor, the community here, is considered men. So af yachid gabri, also individual is a man, and yet we still say that the carbon can that you could bring both of them together on a condition. So I'm a Rava. So there's a question on the idea that with men, it wouldn't be acceptable, that you wouldn't be able to do the smicha, so you couldn't do this conditional carbon. So I'm a Rava, but Tizbara, Rava says, do you really think you could just read this Gemara straight. Hamitarastahi. The price is already amended. You already have to amend the price. You have to fix the text. So Katani Bamed Varmamurim. So the price that says, when is this the case? Kishin Chayim. And they're mixed up while they're alive. All when the Sarvo Shlutin, we have to mix up after they're dead. Whoa. Then we can't. Then it's not the case because then we can just combine all the blood at once and just do one application. But really, that doesn't make sense perfectly because Malach Chayim Malach Shlutin. What's the difference if they're alive or if they're? What's the difference? Malach Chayim Malach Shlutin. What's the difference if they're alive or if they're already slaughtered? It shouldn't matter. Malach Chayim Malach Shlutin. In both cases, it should be made as an individual. Look at Rashi. That means to say specifically while they're alive. And it's arvu kodem smicha kind. It's saying where they got mixed up before the smicha. Hakatani, aval shlutin. But if it was slaughtered, we'll buy down mikol achal. If it was slaughtered, we wouldn't require each one individually. Shlutin navi mishkachas al debai. In shlutin, we should also find it that we require it. You can have the same case by shlutin. Rashi says where in this avokosis bekosos, if the two cups were mixed up and you don't know which cup was which. So really, it must be El Haychai, and it says Rashi Lavdafka. It's not specific. And this is what it means to say in our price. So that's what you have to say. When does our price referring to? It's average shlutin ke'ein chayim, where the shlutin were mixed up, like when they were alive, the kosos. Then we do it. Hold on 1 second. Are you going? You're not coming? Hold on 1 second. Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Becoming such an adult. Thank you. Yeah. So when do we say this? When do we say this? That the when they get mixed up in cups of but if they got mixed up all together, meaning this going in distinct cups of but if they're all mixed together, nothing down and you then you just do 4 from all of them. So we see from here that if Rashi says that the 2 bloods were mixed up in 1 cup, then you put 4 of that matanas korn. Hashta now explains why it's not a question. Leka will suvi. You're not asking the question about smicha. We're talking about a case where they got mixed up after the shchita. So therefore, we don't have the question how they didn't do smicha. But prior to the smicha, then according to everybody, it's not going to be sufficient. Everybody would say it's not going to work. So therefore, it's not a question on the answer of Rabbi Yossi. So now we go back to the phrase, Rabbi Omer, Rowan, and Samatana. If you put one application from all of them, if they got mixed up the blood, and you do one application, Rabbi says, Rowan and Samatana, Rabbi says, we look at the application. If there's a sufficient from each one, it's going to be kshera. Then we'll have to, otherwise, no good. Then where it says, does Rabbi really say this svara? Does Rabbi really say that you need to require to make sure that there's enough blood from each of them in order for it to be good? Otherwise, no good. You let me know. So the Gemara says, God Tanya, I'm a Rabbi. He would Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, this is the case by the Mechatas, by the Paraduma, where we have a bowl of the Paraduma that falls into other blood, any amount. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to do 2 azos. And the Gemara is going to ask about this later on. And it says, Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi says there, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Hazah ain't a tree chashir. It doesn't require an amount. So you see, Rabbi Eliezer he says you don't require that you have the specific amount. So that's what we say, that Rabbi doesn't require an amount. It doesn't require that there's sufficient for each of them. It's just a little bit is sufficient. So, and the Gemara explains, Vatayim Rabbi Eliezer, Hazah kol shu mataris. Any amount is sufficient. Hazah in a tree chashir. Hazah mechza kasher mechza pasol, and if half of it is kosher, Meaning to say, don't say that a kol is mitaris if there's not enough in it. But even if there is some pasuk kshera, it's going to be sufficient. So Rabbi should say it's any amount is okay. So the Gemara says, that the first answer is that Rabbi speaking according to the position of Rabbi Eliezer. Now the answer is the difference between Hazah and Nesina. By Hazah, Rabbi says it's sufficient to have any amount, but by Nesina it requires more. Okay, so this arvu b'bechor b'maiser. Let's say he got mixed up in a bechor maiser, then we say it can't be redeemed. So Amar, and you have to wait for them to get a blemish, and then they can be in. Amar Barachama bechor Beis Shammai. So bechor, a firstborn animal, according to the position of Beis Shammai, that applies even if it has a blemish. And nowadays, eino nifte, emachil nidos. You're not allowed to feed it to women who are tmei, because a bechor cannot be eaten by a person who's tamei. Tmuraso mahu, and bechor eno nifta, and also the bechor cannot be redeemed to go out of its state to chulin. And so therefore, let's say the bechor was exchanged with a tamura, exchanged animal. So we know that the din of a tamura is that you're not allowed to do it. But if you do it, the tamura korban has the same law as the original korban. So the question is, the tamura animal has the same law as the original animal. So let's say you tried to exchange it, what would be the case there? Would also not be able to be redeemed. So Amarava, Tanya, Bechor, Meiser, Mishahumamu. So if the Bechor, so we have a bright, it says that for firstborn animal and Bechor and a Meiser, they got a blemish. Osin, Tamura. What is that? What are you drinking? That'll be, if you don't mind, a lot of sugar, like 5 cups of sugar. So Bechor, Tamura. Sure. Bechor Tamura, thank you. Bechor Meiser Mishahimu, they became a blemish, Osim Tamura, then they can become a Tamura, Utamura is a Kayotibit. The Tamura is the same halacha as them, so it should be the same question. Here too, we would say it has the same halacha. So about that case, now let's say you took, if the Bechor got a blemish, and then you took the value of the Bechor and you're going to give it to the temple. So generally speaking, we try to sell an animal that was hektish. If it got a blemish and we have to sell it, we sell it in the marketplace because we want to get as much money for the hektish as well, as much money for the temple. But a bechor, generally speaking, the kohen eats. So therefore, you can't sell it in the marketplace because it's considered a zigusa for the korban, for the bechor. So you have to sell it in a more dignified manner. But what about this case over here, but that the Bekor's money was given to the temple? So then can you sell it even in the marketplace? Or maybe no, that it's still going to be considered disrespectful to the Bechor. So Rav Yosef Bar Zvida Tashman is Arvo Bechor Meiser, that let's say a Bechor Meiser got mixed up from our Mishnah, Yiruachi Istavu, that they graze until they get a blemish, V'yochel to Bechor Meiser. You eat it with the Kedusha of the Bechor and the Meiser. Lavo Member, isn't this to say the Eno Nishko B'Litra? Doesn't this mean to say that it cannot be sold by the weight? It has to be sold in a respectful manner. So Rav Huna, Rav Chizkiah, Tamid Ravi, earlier Amri, no. Midami, the case is totally different. Hasam Shtei Kedusha to Shnei Gufin. In that case of our Mishnah, it's 2 Kedushos. It's 2 separate things. And it's mixed up. So thank you so much. It's 2 separate Kedushos. But in our case over here, it's 2 bodies. But here, we could say, it's 2 Kedushos and Guf Echad. It's 2 Kedushos, but it's 1 body. So maybe it's not the same case. It's not a good analogy. So Maskiv, Baruch Hato Adino, Enamachom Shakonim Baruch. Wait, take a picture of me doing the daf at the Ohel. So Maskifla Rebbe Yossi Bar Abin. So he challenges us. He says, we were joined by Azriel here, Roe and Shia and Bear, okay, and Max. So now he challenges this case. He says, Ma ilu Amar Heftali Bechor. If he would say, redeem for me this before that I gave its money to the temple, we wouldn't want to him. So So therefore, you wouldn't be able to listen to him. Have to he brought the Rahman Amar Tipada. So the Gemara says, no, that's a different case. That's where you want to redeem it. The Torah says you can't redeem it before. It's a totally different case. Maybe this is allowed. So Elam Ravami says, Kum Hiknazel Misha Kanalo. So he said, no, all it was given was to the one to who it was acquired. What does that mean? Let's look at Rashi. He says, so Kum Hikna Kohen Zel Bedek Habaynis El Ma Shekanalo. Bebachor Zev. Even the Etzlo Hutar which called which and Yaakov knows Haknas Bedek Habaynis Odem Tamei Tzimtzum Mishkal. And since the he all he gave to the temple was what he had acquired. And since he doesn't have the acquired to sell it by the weight, therefore wouldn't be allowed in this case to sell it by the weight because that's the only thing he had. What's the matter? What are you eating there? Oh no. So the Gemara says, everything gets mixed up except for Chatas and Asham because they're two separate animals. Why can't a Chatas and Asham not get mixed up? But one's male, one's female. Chatas also one the Chatas a female, the Ohel is a male. And Gemara says, no, Ika Sayer Nasi. No, there's the goat of the Nasi, which is also a male. So the Gemara says, Hi Seir, Hi Tzemer. So the Gemara says, Hi. No, the one is goat and one is wool, so therefore it wouldn't work. The Gemara says, Pesach Hashem Nami Lomiar, but Pesach Hashem can't be mixed up. The Gemara says, no. High bench Shanam, high bench station. Pesach has to be under 1 year and bench station, and also has to be over 2 years. So the Gemara says, yeah, Ika Asham Nazir, Asham Mator. No, the Asham Nazir and Asham Mator are also under a year. Ika ben Shana, the Milchik ben Shtaim. Some animal is 1 year old and it looks like it's 2. Ika ben Shtaim, the Milchik ben Shana. So then sometimes there are sheep that are older and they look like they're younger. And so therefore, that's not the case. So now, since we're all actually about to go, but the person who keeps telling us to go says, I'll be back in 2 minutes, and he doesn't really mean 2 minutes. That's like a 2 years old that looks like 1 year old. It's exactly like our Gemara. 2 minutes, that's really 1 minute. Depends who's saying it. So yeah, so anyway, okay, we're going to stop the recording now, and that's today's daf. Baruch Hashem, a beautiful daf. And I'll tell you, now we're going